It should have been a dream combination for myself. Wayforward and Atari, working on a sequel to one of the most recognizable Atari games of all time, Yars Revenge. Wayforward themselves is held in high regard by many gamers, and rightfully so. They have 145 games under their belt, and have been handed the reins of franchises such as Contra, DuckTales, River City Ransom, and Clock Tower. Not to mention their Shantae series that started off with an incredible late Game Boy Color release that truly pushed that hardware beyond what it was capable of. But I still couldn't help but to be cautious, for lack of a better word. I put out a video about how I didn't care for the art style being pushed in this game and in Lunar Lander Beyond. And while Lunar Lander quelled my fears a bit, I couldn't help but to be apprehensive about this one. But it's finally here, and I've spent the last week trying to experience everything that the game had to offer. So let's talk about the long-awaited Yars Rising, and find out if it's a golden gem that will bring a classic with an odd premise back to gaming's forefront, or if it's as bad as I feared it would be. Let's find out. Yars Rising was developed by Wayforward for Steam, PlayStation, Xbox, Nintendo Switch, and the Epic Game Store. At this time, it is not available on the Atari VCS, and I don't know if it'll come to that platform or not, but I hope so. You take the role of Emi Yar Kimura, and she's a computer hacker working a front job for a company called Quotech. She took a job there in order to take down the company from within, and from there, things open up into corporate corruption, alien invasions on Earth, and eventually, the fate of the universe lying in the balance. The cutscenes are sparse, but told in a comic book panel style that is, well, okay, I guess. Really, the art style, well, isn't bad, and the in-game graphics look similar to the cutscenes in their style. Yars Rising won't win any graphical awards, but everything looks like it belongs together in the same cohesive world. It's a quirky and consistent style that fans of Metroid will feel familiar with. But the characters, my god, these characters are not great. Emi has a team behind her that doesn't seem to do much but just offer her new destinations on the map. Mal is her best friend, and the person that seems to be, well, the one in charge of the team. She is the one that acquired the contract to take down Quotech, with Emi being the hacker to pull it off.
I've known you since you were 12. I'm not calling you by your handle.
Anthony is supposed to be the tech guy, I think, and is obviously Emi's crush. This allows for quirky, cute, flirty moments that shows off how awkward Emi really is. It's just done so stereotypically that, well, you can pretty much imagine what the dialogue will be and how they'll act, and you're gonna be right.
Totally. I'll be your assist on hacking. This will get you through.
Finally, there's Refresh, and I hate Refresh. He literally adds nothing to the game, and Emi treats him like garbage. So let's just move on. There are more characters to the story, but I don't want to provide any spoilers. Enemies become friends, friends become enemies, and words are shared. The story, much like that in Lunar Lander Beyond, is by far my least favorite aspect of Yars Rising. Once again, the characters have little development, and it feels like their dialogue is written by an adult trying too hard to be cool with their kids. Luckily for us, the story and dialogue beats can be skipped, and that's because most of the rest of the game is quite fun, if not a little by the numbers. And games don't have to be cutting edge or innovative to be a lot of fun after all. And Yars Rising is a by-the-numbers Metroidvania style game. If you like those kinds of games, I think it's going to be right up your alley. Just don't expect anything really new and innovative.
This is much harder on the way back up.
You have all the aspects you would expect from a Metroid-style game as well. And you'll encounter lots of environmental barriers that prevent you from progressing out of sequence. You acquire new weapons, skills, and tricks to get past those barriers and reach new areas that were once out of reach on the map. As you progress through the game, more of the map is filled in, showing just how expansive and large this world is. And Yars Rising is actually impressively large, expanding well beyond the Quotech office building that I thought the whole game would be taking place in. It was a nice surprise to see just how large this world really is. Along the way, Emi has to hack terminals to gain new augmentations to her body and new passive skills as well. She also does this to unlock doors, and this is where the Yars connection really comes in. And it brings in a connection to the Atariverse as a whole.
This is not going as expected.
You will recognize the hacking minigames right away if you played Yars Revenge, because each one is a variation on that game. And the developers actually found quite a bit of unique things to do with the Yars gameplay. I was really impressed. But they also pay homage to games like Centipede, Missile Command, and several other Atari properties as well. The thing is, the hacking minigame, well, it could have been just about anything else, and really it would have worked just fine. It's a flimsy way to connect the original games to this one, but luckily for them, the Yars segments are, well, pretty fun. It just makes me wish that Atari would have expanded on the original with more variations like they have in the hacking minigames a long time ago, if I'm being honest. And there are more connections to Yars, but again, I don't want to spoil too much, and the rest of the connections are in the story beats. I don't think they did a great job connecting to the original source material, but they tried hard, and I don't think anybody else could have done better connecting Yars to a Metroidvania. Well, maybe somebody else could have created more endearing characters, but overall, it works in ways you would expect, especially if you've seen the promotional artwork. Outside of that, the gameplay in Yars Rising is really solid. Again, it's not due to its connection to Yars Revenge, but because they made a really good core Metroidvania game. Emmy shoots rainbow beams from her hands and can move around fluidly. At first, she feels pretty limited, but as expected, once you start gaining augmentations, she really gets around. She can start jumping off walls, flying across small holes in the floor, dashing, and more, and it all feels great and responsive. She's a joy to control, except for one major flaw. She can't shoot straight up or down or on any diagonals. Now, shooting down I can sort of forgive. It's always hard to jump up and shoot down in these types of games. But not being able to shoot up? For shame. And it's not like there wouldn't be a scenario where it would be really helpful. I mean, there's enemies on the ceiling all the time. It's completely possible that I missed a computer that would allow for an augmentation to shoot upwards, but after playing through to the end, I just have to think that it's not there. Enemies will crawl along the ceiling above you and fly over your head, and there's nothing you can do. Nothing at all but try to awkwardly jump and shoot at them. It's just a really strange choice if you ask me. The enemies in Yars Rising have a really cool sense of progression, and I appreciate that. You start out by fighting security and cleaning robots as you move about the Kotek facility. Eventually, once your presence is known, guards and police officers will start tracking you. And you'll have to use stealth Blackthorn style to deal with these guys. Well, at least initially. In the second half, or maybe last third of the game, you get a cool power armor suit type thing that lets you take these guys on. And it's really rewarding after spending so long avoiding them. It's a really smart way to show how far you've progressed, and what a weapon you've become along the way. But before that, Emmy will start to encounter alien bugs during an invasion sequence, and then a full-on Kotile invasion force. Again, this progression makes sense, and it's really cool to see how the danger increases as the game goes on. Now you know that Atari wasn't going to let Wayforward or anybody else do a game that isn't full of fan service for the Atari faithful. We've seen it in Atari Mania, in the car names in Neosprint, the characters in Food Fight Culinary Combat, the ship names in Lunar Lander Beyond, and now the bosses in Yars Rising. You'll encounter things like a Black Widow boss that pays tribute to, the arcade game Black Widow, obviously. That one's really cool, but then you fight the Missile Commander, and I don't know, that boss feels lazy. Like, really on the nose with the name. But I guess Black Widow was too, but at least it kind of made sense there. Black Widow is a crazy bug lady, but this guy feels like something along the lines of, I don't know, Admiral Venture would have been cool. And he could have had a name tag saying AD.Venture. You know, for adventure. I don't know, I suck at this too, I guess. But anyway, there are nods to Atari all over this game, including a few very subtle ones for the hardcore fans. So even though some are in your face, I feel that most of them are done more tastefully than we've seen in previous games.
South. Purple mist equals death. Purple? Maybe it's more of a lavender?
So Yars Rising is a surprisingly deep, fun, and long adventure at around 10 hours, give or take for a first playthrough. And it stayed pretty engaging, minus a section towards the end where you had to backtrack to rescue a few captured soldiers. That felt kind of rehashed and like it was there to pad out the game length, and to justify the size of the world. But it still wasn't boring at any point, and there was always more computers to hack and passive abilities to learn along the way. Oh, and speaking of these passive abilities, you have to equip them in a grid-shaped fly from Yars Revenge. This was really cool, actually. The shape is iconic, and it made me think about what abilities I wanted at different times. You have more abilities than you have spaces to place them in. So if you're going up against a hard computer to hack, then you might want to equip your hacking passives and make it a cakewalk. Or if you're struggling with a boss, you might want to equip your weapon and combat passives to make quick work of them. And if you're just exploring, you might want to equip passives that allow for better wall jumps and such. Again, this aspect is really cool, and it's a shame that it's hidden in the pause menu. I'm sure some people will forget it's there, but I highly recommend utilizing it when you can. As I said, it's pretty smart and a cool way to do things and keep you from becoming really overpowered at everything at all times. So ultimately, how did I feel about Yars Rising after getting through 10 hours or so of the adventure? Well, I really enjoyed playing the game. It's a good Metroidvania, and one of the better ones I've played in recent years. If you're an Atari fan, then I think you'll really enjoy this game. And heck, if you're a Metroidvania fan, you'll probably have fun too. But you're going to realize and recognize how little risks the game takes and how little it tries to innovate. There is nothing here that you haven't seen before. There's nothing here that you haven't played before if you're a fan of Metroid, Castlevania, or any number of the other titles that have come out in the last 20 years or so. But again, it doesn't have to reinvent the wheel to be fun. It's well done, the controls are tight, the upgrades are rewarding, and the progression is really good. However, the story and Yars tie-in is a total dud for me. I don't really like any of these characters. They talk and feel like they're trying too hard to endure to the youth of today. Not to mention that Refresh is literally there to be crapped on almost every time Emmy talks to him. Like seriously, she acts like she couldn't be bothered. And then at some midpoint in the game, she starts acting like he's a friend? Emmy's the worst. But so is Refresh, so I guess they deserve each other. But that's just how I felt. I went into it worried about that aspect, about the story and the anime cutscenes. So maybe I created a self-fulfilling prophecy for myself. I'd really love to hear from you guys if you agree that the characters, story, and Yars tie-ins are pretty weak, or if you like them. But before all that, we have to take Yars Rising into the Atari Network pros and cons section to see what score we are ultimately going to give it. And as always, we'll start with the pros.
Where's a taxi when you need one? Taxi!
For the pros, I have to point out the graphics, while not cutting edge, have a cohesive and pleasing style that just works, and controlling Emmy feels really good. She might feel limited in her movement initially, but it won't be long before her skills start expanding. And speaking of expanding, I feel that the progression in this game is top-notch. From the progression of bigger and badder enemies coming at you, to the progression of the levels and the challenge. It's all just really good. And despite the fact that it's utterly replaceable, I did enjoy the Yars hacking games. And if you don't, then Wayforward wisely put in an invincibility mode that lets you just get it done and over with. I also like the passive system that encourages you to play with your loadout a bit, and having the passives laid in a Yars fly pattern was pretty cool. The game is challenging, fun, and feels like it's at about a perfect length at 10 hours. I think Metroidvania fans will feel right at home, and Atari fans will have fun playing through Yars Rising. But now we have to touch on the cons, and unfortunately I have to start with the story and the characters. They just didn't work for me. There was definitely some cool parts and some cool reveals at times, but overall, I just didn't like it. Beyond that, Emmy's inability to shoot up was a real head-scratcher. Why put enemies on the ceilings if I can't shoot them? The Yars tie-in is also pretty weak. I feel that the hacking minigame could have been replaced by nearly anything and the game would have worked just fine. But outside of the fact that I feel this game is a bit too safe in the sense that it didn't try to expand the genre any, I really don't have any other cons to bring up. So with all that said, Yars Rising is a solid adventure, and a game very much worth playing for yourself. That's why I'm going to give it 4 classic controllers out of 5. It's a good, fun game, and there's no denying that. At the end of the day, I might have hated the story, I might have found the characters annoying, and I might have had a hard time calling this a part of the Yars universe. But the game is solid, and video games are meant to be fun. If you're like me and don't enjoy the story, then just skip the cutscenes and play the adventure. Because it's an adventure worth having. Atari and Wayforward created something pretty good here, even if it's not the Yars sequel I personally wanted. But enough of what I think. Now I want to hear from all of you. Do you agree with my thoughts on Yars Rising? Have you or will you be picking it up? Do you think it needs to be released on the Atari VCS? I mean, it's an Atari property, and that is an Atari console after all. I really hope they bring it out to the VCS, and I hope it's already on it by the time you hear this review. And do you appreciate the story and art style? Let me know your opinions on all this and more in the comments down below. And please consider leaving a like and subscribing if you haven't already. I cover all things Atari, new and old, on this channel, so if you want to be notified whenever I upload something, hit the bell icon below. And please consider following me on social media. Search for the Atari Network on Facebook, X, Twitter, Instagram, all that stuff. And look out for our Discord as well. The Discord is free to join, and the community is growing really fast. I also have a Patreon where you can support me for $2 to $5 a month. In exchange, you get exclusive audio updates, videos, streams, and more. Or you can become a YouTube member to get access to videos a day early, and still get the extra videos and streams from Patreon as well. These classy Atarians have already started supporting the channel, and I couldn't do it without all their help. These guys rock, and I'm so glad to have them as supporters of the channel. And with all that, it's time to wrap up another review here on the channel. I've been the 7800 Pro Gamer, an alien that sneaks into a little girl's bedroom at night to learn about Earth. Apparently, yes, that did happen in the game. And I'd like to thank you all for watching. And remember to stay classy, Atarians.
All right, lady. I'm in charge now of this situation. I mean, not the company.
Please, calm down. I will comply.
What's going on here? What exactly is Kotek building?
You are in over your head, Miss Kimura.